In 1776, America did not look like a future superpower. It looked like a thin line of British colonies along the Atlantic coast, small towns, muddy roads, candlelit rooms, farms, workshops, docks, churches, taverns, and families trying to survive another winter. There was no United States, no president, no constitution, no national flag as we know it. And most people living there had no idea they were standing inside one of the biggest turning points in world history. This is the story of how America was born, not as a clean legend, but as a risky decision made by people who were scared, angry, divided, and very far from certain they would win. To understand 1776, you have to start before the fireworks. The colonies were British. Their people traded with Britain, read British newspapers, used British money, and many still thought of themselves as loyal subjects of the king. But they were also far away. Across the ocean, life moved differently. A farmer in Massachusetts, a printer in Pennsylvania, and a merchant in Virginia might obey British laws, but London felt distant, slow, and expensive. Then came war. In the 1750 seconds and 1760 seconds, Britain fought a huge global conflict against France. Britain won, but victory came with a massive bill, and London looked across the Atlantic and thought, the colonies should help pay. That is where the trouble began. The British government started adding taxes and rules: the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, taxes on paper, glass, paint, lead, and tea. To Britain, this was normal empire management. To many colonists, it felt like being charged by a government where they had no direct voice. The phrase became famous: taxation without representation. But this was not just about money. It was about power. If Parliament could tax them without asking, what else could it do? Could it control their courts, their trade, their land, their future? In taverns and town meetings, people argued. Some wanted protest, some wanted peace. Some thought rebellion was madness, and they had a point. Britain was one of the most powerful empires on earth. The colonies had local militias, angry pamphlets, and a lot of uncertainty. Still, anger kept spreading. In 1773, the conflict reached a symbol everyone could understand: tea. The Tea Act looked like a trick. Accept this tea, accept the tax, accept the principle that London could rule without consent. So, one cold night in Boston, a group of colonists boarded ships in the harbor and dumped chests of British tea into the water. The Boston Tea Party was not a cute prank. It was a direct challenge to imperial authority. Britain answered hard. Boston's port was closed. Massachusetts was punished. That fear pushed the colonies closer together. Delegates met, letters moved, pamphlets spread, boycotts grew. The argument changed from this tax is unfair to a much bigger question: who has the right to rule us? Then came gunfire. In April 1775, British troops marched toward Lexington and Concord to seize colonial military supplies. Local militia confronted them. Nobody planned a clean beginning to a revolution. But shots were fired, men died, and suddenly the argument was no longer just ink on paper, it was war. And this is the part that is easy to forget. For more than a year after the fighting started, many colonists still did not agree on independence. Some wanted rights inside the British Empire. Some wanted full separation. Some stayed loyal to the king. Some tried to keep their heads down and protect their families. Then, in January 1776, a pamphlet changed the temperature of the room. It was called Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine. It asked a simple question: why should a continent be ruled by an island? It helped turn independence from a dangerous whisper into a public argument. By the summer of 1776, the colonies had reached the edge. In Philadelphia, delegates gathered in hot rooms, wearing heavy clothes, surrounded by dust, sweat, and pressure. They were not marble statues yet. They were human beings making a decision that could get them hanged as traitors if they lost. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. Others edited it. Congress debated it. The final document accused the king of violating the colonists' rights, and it made a much bigger claim: governments get their power from the consent of the governed. On July 4th, 1776, Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. That did not magically create a stable country. It created a promise, and then the war had to decide whether that promise would survive. The new United States was fragile. Its army was underfed, underpaid, and often badly supplied. Soldiers marched without proper shoes. Families at home ran farms and businesses without the men who had left to fight. Prices rose, goods were scarce, cities were occupied, neighbor could turn against neighbor. George Washington became important not because he won every battle, but because he kept the army from falling apart when losing would have ended everything. The winter at Valley Forge became a symbol of that struggle: cold, hunger, illness, and the question every soldier had to answer: is this new country worth suffering for? France later joined the American side, which changed the balance. In 1781, at Yorktown, British forces under Cornwallis surrendered. The war was not formally over yet, but the impossible had happened. The colonies had survived long enough to become a country. Still, the birth of America came with contradictions. The Declaration spoke of liberty, but slavery still existed. It spoke of rights, but women had little political power. Native peoples faced expansion, displacement, and violence as the new nation grew. That does not make the story simple. It makes it human. The power of the American Revolution was not that it instantly solved everything. It did not. Its power was that it introduced an idea into world politics with enormous force. A government should answer to its people. So when we look back at 1776, we should not only see fireworks, flags, and polished portraits. We should see the risk. A group of colonies challenged an empire. Ordinary people lived through shortages, fear, and war. Writers turned anger into arguments. Delegates turned arguments into a declaration. And from all of that came a country that began not with certainty, but with a question: can people govern themselves? In 1776, nobody knew the answer. They only knew they had decided to try, and that is why the birth of America still matters. Not because it was perfect, because it was risky, unfinished, and powerful enough to change the world.